All right, so this morning I'm boring a four-wheeler cylinder or a motorcycle cylinder. It's got a pretty small bore on it. And what I did, no real place to grab this without marring it up or anything. So I had this little face plate from my old lathe, but it won't fit my spindle here. But it's got a good boss on it that's pretty square that I could grab in the four-jaw. And I just put the cylinder on here with some T-nuts and some all thread, and got it sit on these 1, 2, 3 blocks. These are precision ground, so they're all parallel and they're all within a few tenths of a thousandth in dimension. And then that keeps it square to this, and got it clamped here with these nuts. And I put some safety wire in here so that when I spin this thing up, these are all held pretty good by the force of the nuts, but that's just to keep me from getting beamed in the noggin by one of these if something was to happen and it come loose. But anyway, after this is mounted here, then my four-jaw, I can adjust these jaws individually, and so I was able to indicate the cylinder in. Now the cylinder, did a lot of measuring on it. The cylinder's got about 3,000 square in it. So, you know, it'd be very difficult to get it to zero run out, but I'm not sure if you can see. Try to get it here. I'm within 3,000ths run out on it like that. And then I don't know if I'll be able to film this part, but if I bring my indicator all the way in here, let me get a light. See if I can get this so you can see it. So I can look. Can you see what I could see? Right there. Now if I can get this thing to focus. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I can look through there and just see the indicator. And so, that's gonna be hard to do. There's no light there. Filming this is difficult, but anyway, I can sweep that and roll it this way and verify that the run on that end is good, and the run on this end is about 1,000th more than I've got it over here. So I've got about 3 on this side and about 4,000ths on this side run out, and I'm gonna call that pretty good, because what I'm seeing is the run out is on opposite sides. So the run out, let's just say that it's on this side of the cylinder here, so that tells me that's wear, and it's on the opposite side over here. And what that means is that the piston is wearing, which is typical, at the top end on one side and at the bottom end of the bore on the other. So, and the new piston that we're boring this for is 25 over. So, man, this camera's blurry. Let me fix that. There you go. The new piston is 25 over, and so it's definitely going to clean all that up and probably work just fine. This cylinder is sticking out past this. That's the reason I had to put it up on these standoffs, so that I could run my boring bar all the way through and have clearance. The reason I didn't grab this directly in the chuck was because I didn't want to put any pressure on this cylinder down here. You know, it's relatively thin, because if I was to put pressure on that and then bore it, whenever I remove the pressure from my jaws, this wouldn't be round anymore. So the plan here is to bore this to 3,000ths smaller than the diameter that I'm looking for, and then I'll hone it from there, and I'll go in with some 80 grit stones first and take out a couple of thou, and then switch to probably a 300 grit stone to get it really close to final dimension, and then I'll come back in with just a few swaps of a 500 grit stone. And the idea with that is that your 80 grit gives you really deep scratches in the cylinder. So, you know, the wave, hang on. Okay, so here's some cardboard here I drew on to explain what we're doing with the hone. So the 80 grit stones will come in and create some really big scratches in the cylinder. So you have really deep valleys and really high sharp peaks. And then we'll come in with probably, like I said, 400 grit stone. I'm not sure what grit stones I have exactly for that bore size. I've got a couple of hones to choose from here. But the idea is that it'll be substantially finer. And then what you do when you do that is that you're not affecting these deep scratches, okay, these valleys. You're just knocking the tops of these peaks off, okay? And what you're leaving is a scratch on top of the peak that is much less than this, but not quite to our finished surface that we're wanting. And then we're going to come back and we're going to take a few light swipes with a really fine stone. And what that's going to do is that's really going to smooth these peaks out on these plateaus. And that's the whole idea. You hear plateau honing, that's what this is. And it basically leaves the profile looking like a plateau. And you still got these really deep scratches in the cylinder. And what they're doing is they allow oil to sit in here and hold oil, and your rings ride up here on this, and the oil provides lubricity and long wear, good sealing, you know, everything that we're really wanting out of a bore. If we were to leave it like this, the first thing that would happen would these peaks would get knocked off by the rings, and that would damage the ring some, and it would also, you know, these wouldn't be as even, it's not as controlled. And then, you know, if we left it like this, it would work fine. The same thing, you'd have some of these peaks get knocked off. And so, you know, we do the best that we can, and we try to get this up here as smooth as we can. And this allows a little bit of a rough surface up here to, you know, what you call seat the rings, which is to allow the ring surface and this surface to wear in. Another reason that we do this is that, so like were we to finish the bore like this, and we measured it with a micrometer because that's how we're setting our, you know, final bore size, we would be measuring on top of these peaks. Well, there's not that much material, like say from here up, and that's going to wear really rapidly. So actually the cylinder, if you measure it like this, is going to be bigger than what you need. It's going to be substantially bigger than what you actually need it to be. So by doing it over here, then we finish here. So we're going to leave it 3 thousandths under. We're going to take it 2 out of it with the 80 stones, and then we're going to go to the medium stone, knock it out, and get it very, very close to where probably less than a half a thou, just a couple of tenths. And then I'll come back with a really fine stone and hit this. And then all this time I'm trying to hit my final dimension that I want for my clearance for the piston. And by doing this, see, you're not going to have that much wear to get this surface seated to the ring. And you've got all this material sitting below this. This is longevity of the cylinder right here. This is how the cylinder lives for a long time. And because you've got all this material up here that provides support for the ring, and you've got all these deep scratches that are going to allow oil to sit in here and lubricate this. So anyway, that's just kind of my 2-minute rundown on plateau honing. So anyway, we'll see if we can get this done. All right, so what we got set up here is I got my mic. I use this little vise to hold it because I ain't got enough hands. And measure the piston. Pistons are not the same diameter on this end as they're on this end. And the reason they do that is because all your heat's up here. This end swells up bigger than the other one. And I just noticed, don't pay attention to my mess on my table here. But anyway, mic the piston here. you typically measure a piston on a car motor about a 1/2 inch, 3/8 to a 1/2 inch up from the very bottom of the skirt. And on a smaller engine, you know, you just don't want to get right against the skirt. You just want to be up just a little bit from that, 3/16, 1/8 of an inch, something like that. But anyway, mic this piston here and got the dimension on it, and then use the same mic in the same situation, in the same spot, you know, without moving it. And I use that to zero my bore gauge. That way, when I go over and start boring the cylinder, I can use my bore gauge to guide me. I'll make a pass, then make a measurement and come back. So what I did was I zeroed my bore gauge to this, and since I want 2/1000 clearance according to the instructions here with the piston, I set my bore gauge to where 0 is actually 1/1000 below the diameter of the piston, and that way that leaves me 3/1000 left to hone to get to my final clearance dimension that I'm looking for there. So anyway, I'll go over and start boring now. All right, so I'm back over the lathe now, and I just want to talk a minute about my lathe setup here. Without having the tool engaged in the work, I ran my tool in until I can just see the point over in here sticking out past the sleeve, so that I know that I'm going to be boring to that depth, and I've still got ton of a mile of room before I hit anything back here. Anyway, so I just want to get clear that's all I need. I don't need to go any farther. And I moved my carriage indicator over here, and it's locked to the way here, and I'll have it, you know, I'll zero it here to where I want it. And so when I start approaching the end of the bore, I'll be keeping an eye on this, and then whenever it, let me get this handle here. And so as we come into the bore and I see that indicator move, I know that I'm clear, okay? Indicator's sticky. Huh. Let me work on that in a minute. Okay, so got that fixed. I just had some grit in my indicator there. So as the carriage approaches here, I'll keep an eye on it, and then you know, stop it when it's somewhere around in there, and then my tool will be just outside the bore there. Another thing I'll mention here, let me back this out. Of course, you'll make sure when you're all the way in, you're clearing everything up here, and you'll make sure that your bore bar has clearance, okay, so that it's not sitting in a funny angle, and as you get to the other end, you start rubbing over here, you know, and that's bad. So make sure that's not, you got plenty of clearance there, and you can adjust all that. And then the way that I get really, really fine adjustments out of my lathe here, that's the reason I trust the lathe more than the mill. I'm just more comfortable over here on the lathe. You know, if you look at your cross slide here, your cross slide's marked off in 1/1000th increments, but you know, those lines are really close together. So if you're really trying to split 1/1000th, it's really difficult with this. But you can use a little trigonometry, and I've got this set at a 15-degree angle. And so what that means is that I'm splitting 1/1000th into a bunch of, you know, several parts there. Hang on. Okay, so this will explain a little bit better about what I'm trying to explain. It'll demonstrate better what I'm trying to explain about the compound. This is called the compound. It's because you can set it at compound angles. So if you'll notice the indicator here, you know, sit on the tip of the tool, and it's set on the way. And then we're at 0 on that indicator. Okay, and then over here on my dial, I've zeroed my dial. And so this up here is metric. We're not worried about that. This is inches down here. So we're 0 there on the dial. So if we move the tool, okay, like we're gonna bore, we're gonna take 5 thousandths off. Okay, we're gonna adjust this to 5 thousandths. Okay, and what you'll see is that the indicator actually moved 2.5 thousandths. Okay, and the reason is you want to remove 5, but the tool, if it moved 5, you would actually take 10 off because you're cutting on both sides of the bore. So 5 on the dial is 2.5 at the tool. Okay, so it cuts it in half. But by setting this at a 15-degree angle, let's just say we go 5 on, let me re-zero this indicator. I'll show you here. Okay, so we re-zero the indicator. Because this is sitting at a 15-degree angle, if we go 5 on this dial, we're zeroed here, okay? We take 5 thousandths, just like we're gonna bore it. Take it to the 5, there. And then 5 thousandths on the compound when it's set at 15 degrees is just over 1,000th there. So really what we're doing, we're cutting our precision, our movement. We're cutting our movement down by, you know, a half or so. I mean, you can do the math on it and figure it out. But really what that allows me to do is to just split hairs. I mean, you're just, when I put 1,000th on this dial, this tool is gonna move just a couple of tenths. And of course you got tool pressure and run out, things like that, you know, that all come into play. But what I'll do when I get into this cut is I'll make a cut and clean the bore up and get it all square to one another to where I've got good, I'm cutting all the way across the thing. Then I'll mic it, I'll take the bore gauge and I'll make sure that I'm cutting square, so I'm same diameter on this end, same diameter on this end. And then I will put, say, since I've got to go 25 total on the whole diameter, that's 12.5 on each side, I'll just get it cleaned up, and then I'll bore gauge it, and then I'll move probably 1,000th on the compound. And that's going to be just a few tenths on the tool. Then I'll make another pass, and then I'll measure it, and I want to see how much I actually took out of the bore for 1,000th on here. And then that'll let me take a little heavier cut and just sneak up on that last, you know, 6 thousandths or whatever to hit the diameter that I'm looking for there to zero my bore gauge. All right, so I'm gonna have to do this off camera because I need all my hands and pay attention to what I'm doing when I'm messing with this thing. So. All right, so I'm making my first pass in here, and the glaze in a cylinder is always kind of hard and it'll cause you to chatter and all of that. So this first pass here, you know, it doesn't sound real good, but we'll get cut through the glaze, and then we'll be down into some fresh cast iron and cut a little better. And like I said, this first pass, I usually just kind of try to cut the glaze and go slow and ease through it. So. All right, so I'm into my second pass here. I got the feed rate real slow, and I had to slow the lathe down a little bit. You can listen to these and hear when you start hearing a singing sound. This is vibrating kind of like a tuning fork, and when that's happening, it's not any good for the surface finish of what you're trying to cut there. So typically you can just slow everything down a little bit and stop that. If it continues to do it, typically you can also do other things like stick some lead out here on this bar and it'll dampen it. But right now it sounds real good. We're through the glaze and into some fresh cast iron. And cast iron doesn't need any lubricant when you cut it. It's got plenty of graphite in it. and it usually machines really nice and works out real well. So I'll just finish feeding out here on this one, and I'm going to measure the bore, and we'll figure out what we're going to need to make for my final 2 passes. All right. So I got the soft jaws in here, so I don't mark this thing up, and I've got this thing in the vise. And I don't know if you can see there, I've done a little bit of honing there with the 80 grit stones to kind of just hit the surface a little bit so I can get a good measurement on it. And I went in and measured it, and it looks to me like I've still got about 1/1000 and a half to go before final size. So I want to take about another 1/2 thou to maybe a little more than that. 1/2 thou to maybe 1 thou out with this 80 grit stone, and then I'll go to the finer one. Let's talk about the honing in it though. This is a rigid hone. It's made by Sunnin. This is an AN600, and it micro adjusts right here and spreads the stones and the wipers out. You know, the old the deglazing type hone that's got the 3 stones and the spring that comes out, you know, those are pretty much worthless. You can use them to just you know, shine a cylinder up or whatever, but you're not going to take any material off at all with it. And you damn sure won't have a straight or round bore when you get done if you hone very much with one of those. But this thing here is really good at, you can really control the bore size. I've honed as much as 25 thousandths out of a cylinder before. It's a lot of work, but I run the 80 grit stones dry because they cut faster, and typically you're wanting to make the deep scratches in the cylinder. And then when I switch to the other stones, I'll be using a lubricant and just keeping it flooded to keep the material washed out of the holes and out of the stones, keep the stones clean. And anyway, you can kind of monitor your bore with your gauge, and if you know you're tight on this end, then you dwell a little bit more on that end, and if you're tight on this end, you dwell a little bit more on this end. But you can really make a straight bore with a Sunnin hone. One day I'll be able to afford a power hone, hopefully. If not, I might try to build one. But for right now, this is what I got, and if you take your time, it works pretty good. So I'm gonna work on this a little more. All right, not sure if you can see it, but the light's reflecting. I got her finished up there. The bore is square, meaning that it same dimensions all the way through it to within, I'd say, 1/4 thousandth. It's better than what my bore gauge can read. So the dial comes to the exact same spot in 3 different places across there. I hit my clearance. I got 2 thousandths clearance to the piston, and I'm pretty happy with the surface finish on it. Looks like I got a decent plateau in there. Like I said, if I had a power hone, I'd be a little bit more consistent with my honing crosshatches, but for what we've got right here, I've had good success with in the past, and I've got no reason to think that this won't be successful as well. I got the sink over there getting full of hot water. I always like to wash them with hot soapy water and make sure you get all the honing dust out of the little grooves in the cylinder, and then I'll blow it off and dry it. Hit it with a little bit of WD-40 to keep it from rusting, and then let it come back to room temperature. And once everything equalizes here in about 20-30 minutes, I will come back and do a final measurement on it. But as of right now, I think we got it.